the best kept secret in America is that we still have more than 2 million people without any taps or toilets at home, no running water at all. And there are really more than 150 organizations working on that issue in some way, some from an environmental angle, some from within the community. There's plumbing groups and research groups and government agencies, but they've never really come together before in a concerted effort to build a community of practice, to collect data, to share what's working, to advocate as a whole in front of people like the federal government to close that water access gap for good. So that's what we're here to do. We're here to build a domestic wash sector that can kind of act as one and get this problem solved. Yeah, so the superstructure for that effort is called Vessel. And Vessel is really just a collective. It's like a backbone organization that helps keep us all in line, bring us all together, get us talking to each other. Vessel was co-founded by DigDeep, the organization I run, and Water for People. And people often look at me and say, like, Water for People? They're an international wash organization based in Denver, Colorado, that builds water systems in mostly low-income communities in places like India and Latin America. And the reason for that is that the international wash community has been doing this model where they have been convening and working together as a sector, building collective power, sharing information, setting ambitious goals. And it's been incredibly successful. I mean, in the last 60 years that they've existed, those organizations, many of which are based in the US, using a lot of USAID dollars, have brought access to water and sanitation to hundreds of millions of people in other countries. But we've never kind of looked in on ourselves and taken that same approach here. So DigDeep working domestically, Water for People working internationally, we're kind of coming together to bring this approach to the US. What happens after this convening? That's the beauty of this convening. Anything can happen after it. I think, we will continue to convene these folks regularly, both in regional groups and also nationally, hopefully in a venue like this, at least once every 2 years, so we can come together at a really high level and say, like, how's it going? What are we working on? But I've been walking around this hotel today, eavesdropping on people's conversations, people being like, I'm on Cherokee and I'm hauling water or setting up a water hauling project, and someone being like, oh, we're doing that in the Central Valley, and oh, we're doing that on Navajo. Like, oh, can you share your specs with me? What's your regulatory environment? How are you doing this? How are you paying for it? What's the fuel efficiency behind it? And like, they're pulling each other off into a little room and creating this little, ad hoc working group. And that's what we want to see in this sector. Like, oh, I need this data. Oh, I have that data. Like, oh, I need a piece of technology that solves this problem. Oh, I have that problem too. Or I have that technology. It's also really exciting because here in DC, it's easy to get some of our government partners in the room. And so people from EPA and the Department of Agriculture Rural Utilities Service are here, and like, they're contributing to and listening to these conversations too, which I think will go a long way in helping, the programs that they stand up be more responsive to the needs of this specific group of people without water access that often gets left behind in federal programming. Well, the first thing I'll say is that if you work in water generally, a third of us are going to retire in the next 10 years. So there are tremendous opportunities, if you don't already work in water, to come work in water and put your skills to use, both in big centralized systems, utilities like, where I live in Los Angeles, but also these decentralized systems in places like the Navajo Nation, Appalachia, and Texas, in the colonias where we're working. If that's not your bag, if you're not an engineer, if you don't want to work in construction, if you don't want to get your hands dirty in this, honestly, the best thing you can do right now to help move this movement forward is educate yourself about it and start telling your Uber driver. Like, there's just so many people in this country who know that, there are other countries, other places without access to water, but they would never think that this is happening in their own backyard. They don't know what it looks like, what it feels like. If you can share that story with someone and help us build a critical mass of Americans who are paying attention to this issue, that's really going to help move the needle.